Like many good Soviet girls, I grew up secretly fascinated by bad girls. In the twilight years of the USSR, prostitution felt like an ancient myth, something from the dusty pages of Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. Yet whispers and rumors always swirled in the school restrooms, feeding our imaginations with hints of a hidden world. Then, suddenly, in the 1990s, the walls of censorship came crashing down. Overnight, stories flooded our carefully sheltered Soviet minds. They revealed an underworld thriving right beside us. Prostitutes weren't relic from the past. They were here, living, breathing, and earning more in a night than professors made in a month. It shattered everything I thought I knew about morality, survival, and power. Then, the day I met prostitution face to face, my world shifted forever. I was sitting in a university cafe with my friend. Let's call her Masha. Masha was a beautiful fashionista wrapped in an enormous, insanely expensive fur coat. I assumed her parents were wealthy. It never crossed my mind that she might have other sources of income. That day, over coffee, she told me she had several lovers, none of whom knew about each other. They bought her gifts, paid her bills, rented her an apartment, and took her abroad. I sat there, jaw on the floor, while she clearly enjoyed shocking me. While you are young, you have to take everything from life, she said. Don't be stupid. Use the opportunities. So, are you a prostitute? I asked, stunned. How could you fall so low? Masha gave me a pitying look. My coat is mink. Yours is what? Stuffed toy fur? I vacation in Thailand. You go camping next to a stinky river. So, who exactly has fallen so low? I was shocked and confused. I had just realized I personally knew a living, breathing prostitute, and she didn't see herself as a victim. She looked at me and my friends as idiots who didn't know how to live. My mother would have fainted if she knew I was friends with Masha. But I was fascinated. I wanted to know more. So every now and then we'd met at a cafe and I'd listen. My name is Elvira Bary, and today I'm going to tell you everything I know about prostitution in Russia. Because, let's be honest, it's interesting. Prostitution in Russia was as old as life itself. Authorities tried to ban it many times, threatening Siberia to those caught. But if there's a market, there will always be someone providing the service. And in Russia, the market was there for three main reasons. First, many marriages were loveless, arranged by parents without regard for attraction. Second, without modern medicine, women often suffered complications from childbirth, and they gave birth often. Some had 6 pregnancies in a lifetime, others as many as 20. Third, cities were full of young men who came to work but couldn't afford to bring their wives. Horse drivers, yard keepers, builders, waiters, and countless others arrived seasonally while their families stayed behind in villages. If a city had a military garrison, it only added to the pool of potential brothel visitors. On top of that, it was considered natural for high school boys and university students to visit brothels. Officially, it was a sin. In practice, these visits were seen as a sign of manliness. Then, in 1843, something changed. Tsar Nicholas I signed a decree legalizing prostitution, but under strict state control. Women selling sex had to register with the police and carry a medical ticket printed on yellow paper. The reform was meant to contain what the Tsar's advisors called moral contagion by placing brothels under police surveillance. In practice, it created a sprawling bureaucracy of inspectors, bribes, and loopholes. By 1914, the Ministry of the Interior counted around 50,000 registered prostitutes across the empire, but those numbers only included women who submitted to gynecological exam twice a week and paid for their privilege. Historians estimate the real number was likely double once you include clandestine streetwalkers, servants moonlighting to pay rent, and dancers pressured by theater managers. In Moscow alone, people spoke of 30,000 women strolling the streets after dark. Conditions varied widely by class. Elite venues in St. Petersburg offered velvet sofas, French champagne, and bills settled discreetly by liveried lackeys. Meanwhile, downmarket dens in the Ligovka district crammed 6 women to a room with straw mattresses, zinc wash basins, and a brass spittoon for decoration. Most women turned to prostitution out of poverty. Court records mention laundresses unable to pay rent, peasant girls fleeing abusive stepfathers, and widows with infants in their arms. A yellow ticket also promised legal residency in the city, otherwise close to peasants. A grim trade of freedom for reputation. Some women managed to use it as a stepping stone, saving tips to open a small shop. Others fell into spirals of disease and alcoholism. The empire's twilight ended with the revolutions of 1917, but the large-scale sex trade did not disappear with the Tsars. After the 1917 revolution, the old yellow ticket system was abolished within weeks. But the demand for paid sex didn't disappear. For many women, it became the only way to feed themselves and their children. So many men had died in World War I, the Civil War, and epidemics, while millions more returned wounded, maimed, and unable to work. Before the revolution, a woman could find work as a domestic servant, teacher, nurse, secretary, or factory worker, but with most factories closed for lack of fuel and supplies, options vanished. Meanwhile, the countryside was constantly raided by red brigades who took everything eatable: cattle, grain, even jars of pickled cucumbers and mushrooms. I describe what it was like in my novel Russian Treasures. Even after the Civil War ended, the situation did not improve. As men returned from the trenches and reclaimed their jobs, women who had filled in for them were forced out. Moscow's labor exchange reported unemployment spikes as high as 80 to 90% in some weeks, with women making up more than half of all job seekers. The party press warned that women queuing for work were standing on the verge of prostitution. In 1921, the Commissariat for Public Health told the All-Russian Venereal Disease Congress that no fewer than 1 million women earn a living wholly or partly by selling sex, based on clinic visits and ration card data. In 1922, the new criminal code outlawed brothel keeping and pimping. But prostitution itself technically remained legal. Private surveys suggested that between 40 and 60% of urban men bought sex at least occasionally. The Bolsheviks viewed prostitution as a social disease to cure, not a crime to punish. The People's Commissariat of Health converted abandoned convents into shelters offering 6-month detox programs, job training, and twice-weekly venereal exams. By 1927, Moscow had 5 such centers, with space for up to 1,000 women, far too few for the scale of the problem. By the summer of 1929, the party declared that paid love could not exist in a workers' paradise, and therefore it must be erased. The crackdown scattered the trade, but did not kill it. Some women boarded trains working the carriages. Others slipped into the new luxury hotels catering to foreign engineers, where hard currency tips outweighed the risk of arrest. On the lower level, Sex became a way to get a job, housing, ration cards, a promotion, a box of smuggled French powder, or even a glass of vodka to kill a hangover. At the top, aging Bolshevik leaders used their privileged positions to get beautiful women into their beds. As the main character of my novel, The Prince of the Soviets, wrote in his secret diary, the soldiers of the revolution have grown older and more infirm. And now they stare death in the face. Not a heroic death on the battlefield, but an ordinary hospital bed. With the romance of their youth gone, the Bolshevik leaders have begun to succumb feverishly to every temptation forbidden to them. After all, the specter of communism may remain forever out of reach. Must they forgo all of life's pleasures in the meantime? In the 1920s and 1930s, places like the Bolshoi Theater and Mosfilm Studios turned into unofficial showrooms where party grandees shopped for mistresses. Among the Soviet top brass, it became fashionable to bed glamorous young women, especially actresses and ballerinas. At dinners, Politburo members traded rumors of who had secured the newest starlet, as if tallying sports scores. In many ways, it was cursed prostitution. Saying no was dangerous, not only for the woman, but for her family. Apparently, my grandfather, a Soviet army colonel, knew something about this world. When my mother was young, she dreamed of becoming an actress. But her father forbade her from even considering it. He told her there were only two paths for actresses: barking on stage as a dog in some rundown provincial theater, or becoming a whore. Between 1917 and 1923, roughly 2 million Russians fled the Bolsheviks, chasing rumors of safety as far as the Mediterranean and the Yangtze. The moment they stepped onto foreign quays, the ruble was worthless, aristocratic titles became punchlines, and for thousands of women, survival now ran through the night economy. The reasons were much the same as for women who stayed behind in Soviet Russia. Many had lost their husbands or fathers, or the men in their lives were too wounded, too deep in alcoholism, or too crushed by depression to provide for their families. A common fate for those forced to leave Russia against their will. These women had been raised to be wives and mothers, not to work, and even if they wanted to, there were few jobs available. Most didn't speak the local languages, leaving them with few options. Constantinople, now Istanbul, absorbed the first tidal wave of refugees. By 1921, Russian committees had lodged 1,500 women formally registered as sex workers. Locals said the real figure was 3 times higher once you counted the flower girls, who sold violets by day and themselves by night along Peras cafe terraces. Further east, Shanghai glittered with bigger promises. In the international settlement, dance clubs advertised foxtrots with blondes who spoke barely any English. If you want to know more about this wild underworld, read my novel, The White Ghost's Empire. Local moral crusaders wanted to purge the city of these immoral Russian women, but if they were honest, they would have had to purge their own husbands too. Wealthy Europeans and Americans enjoyed the new possibilities, especially during the summer, when their wives and children escaped the heat at seaside resorts, leaving the men to entertain themselves in Shanghai's dance halls and brothels. Berlin and Paris offered glamour, but few job opportunities for Russian emigres. After midnight at Montparnasse's Dome, former countesses competed with ex-ballerinas for clients. A noble title, real or fake, could bump the fee from 10 to 15 francs. Across all centers of Russian immigration, the same pattern repeated. Prostitution was rarely a chosen career, more often a plank suspended over an economic abyss. The same woman who rented herself out by the hour on Friday might lead a church choir on Sunday, clinging to the rituals that kept her pre-revolutionary identity alive. Sometimes I wonder if the descendants of these women now living in the West know how their great-grandmothers survived those years. Eventually, many of these women found jobs or remarried, building new lives. But in the first years after the revolution, prostitution was a lifeline, and it was everywhere. From the very beginning, the Soviet political police weaponized sex. Attractive women were recruited as spies and informants, tasked with extracting secrets from those who let down their guard. By the early 1930s, Deputy NKVD Chief Yakov Agaranov had formalized the tactic. Bolshoi theater dancers and Mosfilm starlets were recruited as swallows. They weren't paid in cash, but in food rations from special stores and the promise of a starring role. Their assignment was simple: charm visiting dignitaries, wandering diplomats, even rival party officials, and report pillow talk back to their Lubyanka handlers. Some swallows were instructed to coax signed love notes or compromising photographs that could later be used as leverage. Others simply kept the rooms wired while pouring Georgian wine. During the Cold War, the machinery scaled up. Inside the KGB's second chief directorate, a desk nicknamed Department S collected bellhead confessions on everyone from disgruntled Soviet writers to British attachés. Abroad, specially trained interpreters and airfloat flight attendants would guide Western businessmen through a curated nightlife. A chance meeting at the hotel bar, a detour to a riverside apartment, a hidden camera behind the mirror. Not every operation ended in blackmail. Sometimes the photos were simply filed away, waiting for the day the target received a promotion worth exploiting. One of my subscribers, a retired diplomat who worked in Russia in the 1980s, told me that swallows would start calling his hotel room around 9 p.m. and wouldn't stop until well after midnight. Occasionally, they would even knock on his door. When he traveled with his wife or daughter, he would have them answer the 9 p.m. calls, and the callers would immediately hang up upon hearing a woman's voice. When traveling alone, he found another way to make this call stop. They would ask, "Do you want a girl?" And then he replied, "Oh yeah. Can she cook? Will she polish my shoes?" It wasn't easy for foreign visitors to resist temptation. Many of the men who came to the USSR weren't exactly used to the attention of a stunningly beautiful woman. Sure, they knew about the spies, but it's human nature to believe the flattery. What if she really likes me? What if I'm so special that a beautiful Soviet woman can't resist me? They wanted to believe they were living a movie romance, a brave American and a pretty Soviet girl together against the world. Many regretted that naive hope. In the 1990s, it became harder to tell who was behind these approaches. Was it the FSB continuing the old games, or were the women simply working for the local mafia? Flyers left under your car's windshield wipers. A madam handing out business cards in the hotel elevator. Call this number, and a pretty girl will come to your room. Or a folder on your bedside table reading, "Why spend the night alone?" Felt more commercial than covert. But in Russia, you could never be sure. When perestroika cracked open borders and wallets, Western businessmen flooded Moscow with pockets full of dollars, tipping more in a night than a senior engineer made in a month. Hotels like Rossiya and Cosmos became unofficial marketplaces, and Tverskaya Avenue filled with women chasing hard currency as the ruble collapsed. People were fascinated. Officially, prostitution hadn't existed in the Soviet Union, so many didn't realize it was even possible. And it paid shockingly well, or so it seemed. Newspapers printed scandalous articles. Books and movies about prostitutes became bestsellers, and early social media lapped up blogs claiming to be written by working girls. One of the most famous turned out to be fake, but the curiosity remained. In reality, the glamour was mostly fiction. Mass layouts hit women first, and for many, selling a night, a week, or finding a sponsor felt like the only way to keep food on the table. It was dangerous work, controlled by racketeers demanding street rent and corrupt police looking for bribes. Many young women tried their luck abroad, lured by fake promises of secretarial work, only to have their passports taken and forced into prostitution in Turkey, Egypt, and the Balkans. Most lasted only a few years before being sent home sick and broken. Today, prostitution in Russia is more varied than the Chinese buffet menu. There are roadside sex workers serving truck drivers, bathhouse girls, and provincial modeling agencies that are just escort services in disguise. For many successful men, hiring prostitutes is seen as normal, a symbol of masculinity and wealth. It's common for a group of men to dine, drink, and then call in girls to continue the evening. One acquaintance told me how, as a young woman, she and her friend would moonlight whenever businessmen visited their small town. They worked as shop clerks by day, and when invited out, would end the evening with paid sex. They called it having a good time. At the top end, oligarchs regularly ordered flocks of glamorous girls to entertain their guests, with some girls becoming mistresses and showing off luxury trips on Instagram. I was once hired to give a consultation to one of these Instagram beauties who wanted to write a book to inspire young women. She called me from a limo in Dubai, clearly trying to impress. Curious, I googled her. Of course, she was a young mistress of a Russian oligarch. She wanted to know how much she'd need to pay to make her book a bestseller. I tried to explain that readers' love can be bought. It has to be earned through hard work and practice. But she didn't want to hear it and moved on to someone else who would gladly take her money. And how has the war affected the sex trade in Russia? At the expensive end, demand remains high. Moscow's kinky party reported record attendance in 2023. People looking for distractions to avoid thinking about the war. Restaurants and nightlife are doing fine too. At the cheap end, the front lines have become a customer base. Prostitutes flock to towns near the border, hoping for quick cash from soldiers willing to pay. But competition is fierce, and prices have crashed as newly widowed locals join the trade. If this video opened your eyes to a new perspective, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share. It genuinely helps us reach more people eager to learn the truth. And I want to hear from you. Which hidden corners of Russia should we uncover next? Drop your ideas in the comments below. If you are hungry for more hidden stories, don't miss the short film I narrated, Lara and the Maniac, written by Slava Pilotov. You'll find the link in the description below on my second channel, Elvira Bary Forbidden Books. Thank you for joining me on this journey into Russia's hidden worlds. Until next time, stay curious.